today we are going to be stacking a single tiered cake, but not just any single tiered cake. It's going to be a single tiered double barreled cake. So what is a double barreled cake? A normal cake tier has 4 or 5 layers of cake. In my business, a single tiered cake is a 5-layer cake. So that is a norm for my business. So when we talk a double barrel cake is any cake that is more than 5 layers. So usually 6 layers and up. So I'm going to show you how I stack it. Let's get started. Like always, I always use an MDF board. I drill a hole right in the middle. So this is my cake drum. I love MDF wood because it is sturdy, because for the height of your cake, you want a sturdy base to hold the weight of the cake. So we have our MDF board. All of the cakes that we stack in this kitchen always have to have a center dowel. And for our center dowel, we're using a 16-inch poly dowel. So we're going to insert that into the hole. It's usually a nice fit because the hole in the MDF board is slightly smaller than the dowel. So that way when we insert it, it fits snug. Every cake also has to have a cake board. So you can frost directly on your cake drum, but from experience, I stopped doing that because I found that as your cake settled, and if your cake is being transported and not very carefully, your cake could shift because it's sitting directly on the board. It could shift. So I started using a cake board underneath every cake between the cake drum and the cake itself. So we're going to glue this to the cake drum with some buttercream. We're using here for glue our Angie Arnaud faux Swiss meringue. We put a generous amount because this is the glue that's going to hold our cake board to our cake drum. I have already scored holes in my cake layers. So the cake layers are cold, they're straight from the freezer, and I have holes in them so that way they will fit over our dowel. And now we'll add some filling. Like always, you could always use a piping bag for this process. I prefer not to. I find it easier to scoop my fillings right onto my cake layers. So do what's comfortable for you and what works for you. So we're going to do cake layer, filling, cake layer, filling, and another cake layer. So now at this point, we have 3 more cake layers to go, but the cake needs some support because the taller you go, the weight of the cake increases. So we need to support the weight of the other 3 layers so that way it does not put any pressure on the cakes underneath. So we're going to support this by putting some dowels right into these layers. So I'm going to use here my dowel guide to help me place the dowels in this cake. This is the odd number dowel guide. It has the 9.5, 7.5, 5.5, and 3.5. This is a 7-inch cake. So I'm going to place dowels in it using the 5.5-inch guide. And within the 5.5-inch guide, I need to place 4 dowels. I have chosen to use the blue square poly dowel. Because this cake is a smaller cake, these work perfectly. So I'm going to place them in my guide. Alright, so they're all in. Now the beauty of the blue square poly dowel is you can cut it with a scissors. Even my dowel guide in place, I'm going to use that as my guide to cut my dowel. Now I can remove the dowel guide. Alright, so now my dowels are all cut to the same height. That is the whole point of using the dowel guide. So that way you have a nice even cut and you have a leveled cake. So we're going to add some frosting to that. So not only do we need dowels to support the layers on top, we also need a place for them to sit. So we're not going to place the layers directly on the dowel. We're going to place the layers on another cake board. So now the cake board you choose to go in the middle of your double barrel cake should be smaller than the width of your cake. So here I have a 7-inch cake, and here I'm using a 6-inch cake board. What I like about using the dowel guides to cut my cake dowels is that it gives me evenly cut dowels, and that way I always get a leveled cake layer. So as you can see, our cake layer is leveled. So now we can continue to stack our cake layers. Place some filling for glue. Some more filling. Cake layer. So as you can see, we only have one more cake layer to go, and we still have a whole lot of center dowel left. So we're going to cut our center dowel. With the white poly dowels, you need a special tool to cut them. You need a Milwaukee cutter. It cuts them nice and straight and even. Alright, now we'll put our final layer of filling and our last layer of cake. This is a pretty tall tier. Now we're going to work on our crumb coat. Here I'm going to use the cookies and cream filling as my crumb coat. And once that's done, we'll set it in the fridge, let it firm up, then we'll put our finish on it. Again, I like to work with a small offset spatula. Always use what makes you comfortable. I'm very comfortable using the small offset. It feels comfortable to hold. I'm able to work. So use whatever works for you. Now we have our crumb coat. We're going to place this in the fridge so it firms up, and then we can add our final coats. I'll see you shortly. Our cake is nice and cold, so now let's add some more frosting to it. If your goal is to achieve a nice sharp edge without using acrylics, to help you. Then I have found that chilling your cake between frostings will give you a solid base to work with, which will in turn give you a sharp edge. This is what I do. I put a crumb coat, refrigerate it, let it get cold and firm so I can have a solid base to work with. Then I'll put a second coat, which is what we're doing right now. I'll put it back in the fridge so it's nice and cold. So with the second coat, you're filling in the holes. You see how we have gaps? So that's what we do in the second coat. We're going to fill in all those holes so we get a nice shape. Fill in the holes. Your goal is by the time you put in a third coat, your shape is already in place. You're just putting it on your color. And if you desire to color your buttercream at this stage, that is perfectly fine too. It just helps you save color. You use less color when you put your color on your last coat, especially when you're working with very dark colors that could stain your mouth. So when you're working with blacks and the deep colors, reds, deep blues, dark purples, those colors I prefer to place with my third coat. I don't like to place them with the second coat. So with those cakes, the second coat will be white, then the third coat will be the dark color. That way you minimize the amount of color the clients will be eating, so they don't stain their lips and their tongues. And it saves you money because you use less color. But for lighter colors, you can get away with placing the color in the second coat. The choice is always yours to make. You see how our shape is forming nicely. A nice, an almost perfect finish. And our sharp edge is coming in. There's so many ways to achieve your sharp edge. You could chill the cake right now and wait for it to get cold before scraping the top to reveal your sharp edge. Or you could just remove the excess buttercream from the top and chill it and smoothen it out when you're done, when it's nice and cold. The goal when you scrape is for your scraper to touch all sides of the cake. And we're doing that right now. So, second coat is on. I'm going to place this back in the refrigerator. Let it get nice and cold. And when we get it out, we'll place our final coat, which will be our color. I'll see you soon. So we're going to create a two-sided cake with two different colors. So I'm going to use a parchment paper strip to help me separate each side. So our final coat are two different colors. Our first color is a blue. I'm going to fill in the holes so that way our scraper will touch all the sides of the cake. is perfect. Beautiful. So our next color is an orange. So we're going to do the same. Now I'm going to place it in the fridge and we'll see the final look. Hi, our cake is all ready. It's cold. Now I am just cleaning my edges. I'm using a thin scraper. Come on in so you can see clearly. You see how rough this edge is? You take your thin scraper and you pull in, pull in, pull in. Now our top is nice and smooth. Now we're going to clean the edges just slightly using the same thin scraper. I'm just going to remove. You want to be careful there. You don't want to drag. You don't want to drag it. Just a soft touch. Soft touch. All right. So I hope this helped you understand how to stack a double barrel single tier cake and also how to place two colors on the same cake, as well as how to clean up your sharp edges. I will see you in our next lesson.